Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Pollution Prevention Roundtable's webinar entitled Implementing the New Environmental Management System with its Risk-Based Thinking, presented by Dr. Robert Pojasek. This is one of many NPPR webinars on a technical topic that relates to pollution prevention. All participants will be in listen-only mode. If you have a question, use the question tab on the control.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. Start over again. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the National Pollution Prevention Roundtable webinar, Implementing the New Environmental Management System with its Risk-Based Thinking. Our presenter is Dr. Robert Pojasek. This is one of the continuing series of technical webinars that the National Pollution Prevention Roundtable conducts. All participants will be in listen-only mode. If you have a question, use the question tab on your control panel for the webinar. There will be a survey sent to all of the attendees as a follow-up to get your reaction and evaluation of the webinar. Dr. Pojasek is an internationally recognized expert in sustainability and risk management. He's worked in over 25 countries and published more than 100 papers on these topics, and he is an adjunct professor at Harvard University Extension School. So at this point, I will turn the screen over to Dr. Pojasek.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. So as you can see here, I've just recently joined, after 40 years of consulting, I just joined a company called Verdantix, and we do market research, and basically I'm on the research side now. And one of the areas I've been following very closely is the revision of the ISO 14001, and it'll be out this fall. And you know, it has risk-based thinking, even though they don't sometimes put it in there, but it is in there. And just I'm going to make the transition to the first slide here, so I'm just going to see. So So Jeff, I'm trying to get this to click. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. Okay. So what I'm going to try to do in this presentation, take about 40 minutes, and I'm going to look at the revision of ISO 14001. And there will be 3 years. So if it comes out this fall, which it should, there'll be 3 years to certify. But realize if everybody waits to the 3 years, there's not going to be enough auditors around to recertify everyone. So they had actually recommended that you start the transition when the DIS, the draft international standard, came out, and that came out quite a while ago and is just been worked on a couple weeks ago in Tokyo, and will be coming out soon as the FDIS, the final draft international standard. So you're running, most of the places are running out of time and already, because it's really different. Then you're going to need to have a transition strategy. So I'm going to try to present some of the old things that we've done for years in ISO 14001. And many of them are still there. There's a couple things that have been taken out. And talk a little bit about the new. But I'm going to really be stressing there are two ways to look at the standard. One is just to look at it, well, there's some changes, I'm going to make the changes, and we're going to move forward. And I have all of that at the back of the presentation, so I'm not going to show those slides, but when you do get copies of the slides after my last slide, there's a whole set of slides that tell you what the new section numbers are, so you get to see those. And I'm really going to focus a little bit in on this risk part, because I think it really offers tremendous opportunities to the pollution prevention technical assistance community and people that are doing energy efficiency reduction. And I do want to give due credit to probably the reason that got me interested in this whole area was a guy that we all know very well, and maybe he's on with us today, Cam Metcalf. And I'll pay a tribute to him later on in the presentation. But it's one of the first ones to really get the idea that, you know, if I can get pollution prevention into the management system standard, it's much more likely to happen with records and things like that. And you know, he's correct. And I think the new change is quite different, but I think it's even better than what Cam had to work with when he started this program. So to begin, you'd say, well, gee, really, it's still Plan, Do, Check, Act. That sounds good. So that's still here. But the number 4, 5, and 6 numbering system's gone. I got a lot more numbers now. Notice I do start with 4, which you see on the outside on the left-hand side. I go all the way up to 10 now. Wow. So there's actually a lot more stuff in here. And as I said, even the things that you did before will have additional things being done. But I think that Plan, Do, Check, Act is probably where they part. I mean, they still have this in there, necessary, should be in here, but there's a lot of other focus areas that I really wanted to sort of spend a little bit of time on. Now I want to start with these first 2 bullets because these are just incredibly important. That if you're going to work with any company that has ISO, or you actually have a company that has ISO in it, the management system always tells you the what. Here's what it is that you need to do to make this work. It never tells you the how. And we're going to give you some ways now. The new system sort of gives you some ways to look at the how. But it would turn out that everybody, even in the same company with 100 facilities, that they would do the how differently in every one of the facilities, but the what would be the same. So that's one that you really need to understand, that because some people do just the what, and those systems just never work well. They may get a certificate on the wall, but they don't really work well, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult in the new system to get to the how. So what's been left out? So ISO 14001 is going to come out at about the same time as a revision of ISO 9001. They're being written to the same format, which I'm going to show you in a couple minutes. But ISO 14001, and they've been belligerent about this all along, because when they did the 2004 edition, everybody in the world went to process focus, or systems focus, and ISO 14 said, we're not going to do that. We don't like that. And everybody else went to the fact that you had to demonstrate continual improvement to be certified. And as you know, in the old ISO 14001, you just have to have a commitment. You can wink and have your fingers crossed behind your back, and you never, ever have to continually improve, but you have to have a commitment. That's all you have to have. And that's changing. That's going to change. So if you look at the ISO 9001, both of these are just about ready to go into final draft now. It's making this, it is in the ISO 9001. It says by making risk management much more explicit. So if you're doing risk and you're not talking a lot about it, that's called implicit. If it's sort of in your face all the time, then Cam teaches us a lot about that. It's if it's explicit, it's got to be sort of like in your face. And incorporating risk management and the requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining a continual improvement of the environmental management system that's in ISO 9001. And it even says that organizations can choose a more extensive risk-based approach, which is an ISO 31000. And I'm going to give you some websites that have some good information on ISO 31000, which is a guidance document, by the way, not a management system. But it's a risk management guidance document, and there's a couple of websites that are available that talk about ISO 31000 written in plain English. I love it. So, oh, by the way, the new systems were written in a way that they had to be understandable by a micro business, and that's one of the tests. In a micro business in the United States, it's 5 or fewer people, and in a few countries, it's 10 or fewer people. So that many of the companies you work with should be able to conform to the new standard because it's supposed to be completely scalable now. They'll have to do everything, but they'll do a little differently. I'm going to talk about that, and that's a big risk thing. And then they left out the process approach again. I don't know. The ISO 14001 people really have trouble thinking about process maps and thinking about things like that. Oh, well, we know all about that, you know. Well, yeah, you do, but why can't we put that down in writing? Everybody else seems to do that. And what it really does is gives you a consistent and predictable results. And you're looking at, you know, being effective and being efficient. And being efficient is pollution prevention, right? In many ways, or energy management in that case. So with that said, so that's sort of a disclaimer here. I'm going to be talking about these two things because even though they're not mentioned in ISO 14001 revision, they're in there. And believe me, they're in there. So you can see them if you want to see them, or you don't have to see them if you don't want to see them, and that's how they're going to get the new standard passed. So what happened? And that actually started about, I'm going to say around the year 2010. They were trying to get ISO 9001 and 14001 on the same numbering system, and no one seemed to have any interest. So they came up with what's called ISO Guide 83, and ISO Guide 83 put them on the same platform, and the guide never got approved, but they ended up with this what's called this harmonized system. And any of you that work with material safety data sheets know that the material safety data sheets are no longer called material safety data sheets anymore. They've been harmonized around the world. And one of the dates that this is kicking in is, I believe, June 15th of this year. So ISO's become harmonized too. Everybody's becoming harmonized. Isn't this great? So here's the line. Every single management system standard will have the same 10 rows. So the action really begins in row 4. And most of you know nothing about context, and it's a brand new thing. And then leadership, planning, supporting processes, operations, performance evaluation, and improvement. And improvement will be absolutely required in ISO 14001 now. So they've removed the 3 commitments. The commitments are gone, and they're all in here now. And brought in pretty much by risk. So the risk-based thinking, and again, the way they define it in ISO 9001, it's a systematic approach to risk. So rather than treating it as a single component. So we're not going to, and by the way, you've always done risk in ISO 14001 because that's how you come up with your significant aspects. It's really risk management, but no one wanted to call it risk management. We don't do risk assessment around here. We just come up with significant aspects. Well, you're using risk management. No, we're not. And so, yeah, well, you have been. So that's not new. And by taking a risk-based approach, the organization becomes proactive rather than reactive. Haven't we been talking about this for years? Preventing or reducing undesired effects like having waste or using too much energy, or promoting continual improvement. God, we've been doing this for our whole career. Preventive action is automatic when a management system is risk-based. So preventive actions have been removed. There's no such thing as preventive actions anymore. They've been removed because they're going to be handled, and I'm going to show you how they're handled. The problem with risk is everybody thinks about it as negative stuff. Risk are really, really bad things that can happen. Really, really, really bad things. And we need to know about them, and we need to deal with them. However, in ISO 31000, there's an upside or a positive side of risk called opportunity. And, of course, that's what we've been doing for years, too. So let's think about risk just for a second. And this is the actual international definition of risk. It's the only international definition of risk. The United States of America signed off on this, so the full federal government uses ISO 31000 as their definition of risk. So it says risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. So the whole idea here is that we live and work and play in an uncertain world. Lots of crazy things happen here. I live in Boston. We get about over 90 inches of snow on the ground right now. Who would have ever thought? We'll have our coldest February in history. If you look at average daily temperatures, and it's not just slightly breaking the record, it's smashed the record every day. We've only had one day that's gone up above freezing, I believe, and that was last Sunday. So, you know, it's a lot of uncertainty. And then we have these effects. So the purpose of risk management is to identify and manage issues and situations that could prevent an organization from meeting its objectives. I think this is really important because when you do pollution prevention, you're simply going in and trying to reduce the amount of waste. So how important is that? To the managers, not at all, because the managers really have to meet objectives. Because if an organization doesn't meet its objectives over time, it has to go out of business. So setting objectives is really important. How does that affect you? Well, this is a little bit busy here, but if I use that same top row, objectives, uncertainty, and effect, it turns out that uncertainty has two effects, a positive effect and a negative effect. And actually ISO 14001 did put this in. They actually now talking about opportunities and threats. That was one wonderful thing they did in that program. But so everyone knows what to do with threats. You run risk assessment on them. No one knows what to do about the opportunities because you handle them differently. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But pollution prevention people really spend an awful lot of time with opportunities. They're always looking for opportunities to prevent pollution. And so they can now become the guardians of this because no one else has any interest in it whatsoever. And they can feed into the risk management program as the risk assessment process comes across there. And that's going to go up and help the organization meet its objectives. So think of yourself as the keeper of the positive opportunities that are in here. Plus, in a way, you're helping the organization set responsible objectives on the other side. So there's your role. It's sort of now it's written in there. So if I give you just a little bit of risk management 101, ISO 31000 has three areas, as you'll see when you read ISO 31000 in plain English. It's got principles, it's got a framework, and it's got a process. So again, the principles are going to guide the framework designed to integrate risk into your management system, and the performance of risk assessment will feed back in. I'm going to show you where these come in, but this is basically how you look at it. Now these principles are pretty cool, and they're in this guidance document too, and there's 11 of them, and it says that, and the principles really work outside of risk too, so these could become your pollution prevention principles. So we will absolutely never, ever do pollution prevention again unless it creates and protects value in the organization. Wow. And we've been saying that, right? How long? We will never do pollution prevention unless it's an integral part of all organizational processes. Well, yeah, we have to look in different places, and sometimes, you know, when we do it here, it fits over here and stuff like that. It's got to be part of normal decision making. It's got to explicitly address uncertainty. So uncertainty might be that the price of oil is going up, then we want to use less of it. Now it's going down. I don't know what we're going to do about that now, but it's causing a lot of uncertainty. It's got to be systematic, structured, and timely. Yeah, we do that. Based on the best available information, yeah, we got the whole P2RX. We get a lot of good information out there. But here's where it really starts stepping up. It's got to be tailored, and it's got to be aligned with the organization's context. So what's the size of the firm? How do they do business? Where are they located? That sort of thing. It's got to fit. You can't use a success story everywhere. You got to align it with the organization. Say, well, This was written for an electroplating company, but we found out that it works really good here and here. And it's worked in different size companies. So this is a good test for your success story. You got to take into account human and cultural factors. Got to be transparent, inclusive, dynamic, iterative. I mean, these are all great things. So the principles, they're in ISO 31000. Really cool. So this is sort of the framework that they use in risk, and of course it looks very similar to the Plan, Do, Check, Act. So the principles come in and help the management establish the intent of the program. Now, I don't know any manager anywhere in the world that wouldn't sign up for those 11 things we just spoke about. So if we say, yeah, we're going to do these things, we're going to do pollution prevention in these things, and okay, we get some intent. Then we're going to determine the context of the organization. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Do a risk map. Come up with the opportunities and threats. Now, this is your aspects, but we're going to have good aspects and bad aspects now. And the risk assessment feeds into that. We do the do on the bottom, we do the check on the side, and then as we start over again, we're doing the beginning of the plan again, the act part. So, okay, so that makes sense, and this is right out of ISO 31000. So let's start talking about this risk-based thinking. Here's what's going to happen. When this comes out, the organization is actually going to have to articulate and write down what their objectives are. Whether it's sales, whether it's not using certain materials, whether it's keeping the customer happy, whether it's keeping the community happy, all of those things. And that's typically done in a mission statement. And the objectives are just how do you make the mission statement happen. It's usually 3 or 4 things. Then they're translated to objectives in the process. And then down at the worker level, there's goals. So that you usually have about 2 goals to get an objective. But every objective in the company has to be traceable up to those 3 or 4 objectives on the top. So you can't have a sustainability program or a pollution prevention program that is a separate silo. Everything that they do has to be mapped up objective-wise to the top. And there's a whole bunch of publications on how to do that. You got to identify stakeholders and their interests, because ISO 14001 is still going to call them interested parties. But ISO 9001 and many of the other, almost every other standard, are calling them stakeholders. They are stakeholders, I'm sorry. All stakeholders are interested. You know, calling them interested parties, they were just doing that politically, but they're stakeholders. And if you look in ISO 31000, they're called stakeholders. So you got to articulate the external and internal environment. I'm going to show you how to do that. Articulate the context of the risk assessment, and then define the risk criteria. So here's how you do it. The external context is everything outdoors. It's the environment, it's Mother Earth, it's the neighborhoods, it's the community, it's climate change, it's everything out there. So you use a thing called pestle analysis. It's cool stuff. It's to find the factors. It's political, economic, socio, technical, legal, and environmental. And you look for factors in each of these. And then you actually use something called a SWOT, S-W-O-T. And strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Hey, opportunities and threats, that's what we're doing here. So you do that, and these, what you're going to find is these factors in the pestle get turned into opportunities and threats. Then you got the internal context, which is inside your operation, your process mapping, your employees, your internal, and you do the same. They're typically using something called a SWIFT. So it's a structured what-if, what's the T, technique. And so it's basically asking questions about the process map. And that's the factors, and then you can find opportunities and threats. And it might be opportunities to use a safer chemical. It may be an opportunity to go to a dry process versus a wet process, all of that stuff. And that goes down the risk register. And then we got these legal and other requirements, code of conduct, and they sort of feed. They're both internal and external. And then you come down with a bunch of risk. Now this is what's so cool. I actually sort of put this together. Everybody recognizes the left-hand side here. It's the heat map, right? Red. Oh, I hate red. Everything that's in red is bad. So we got to get stuff out of the red zone, you know. But that only deals with threats. So what I did is made a flip side, and I have a green zone. Oh, I got a green zone up there now. So what I can do is I can put all the really good stuff in the green zone and all the really bad stuff in the red zone, and then I can see if I can't start working one against the other, sort of offset program. And that helps me with my risk. So I got likelihood versus consequence. One thing we don't like to talk about in risk is we don't like to talk about impacts, because no one can really quantify an impact. It's sort of, it's really hard to quantify. So, and an impact is when you look out there and you see something really bad you did, that's an impact. But if you go stand where the really bad thing is and look back at the company, that's a consequence they have. And we can monetize consequences. It's been done for ages. That's how you get your automobile insurance, your home insurance, your life insurance. It's all about consequences. So this is, so remember, preventive actions have now been eliminated. There's no more such thing. If there's no commitment to the prevention of pollution, there's no more preventive actions. Basically, it's coming up with these opportunities on the right-hand side and making them work. That's just really cool. I really like that. And this is sort of the process you use. But this process is very, so notice that you're not allowed to do risk assessment anymore unless you're talking to stakeholders. That's pretty cool. And you got to monitor and measure it on the right-hand side. But what we're trying to do is replace this risk treatment at the bottom, so where you make a bad thing good or you buy insurance to cover it, and have it be a response now. So we got this, we get a risk, and how do we respond to that risk? And of course, we're going to respond to threats very differently than opportunities. So this is really a pretty good chart here. So threats, gee, we want to avoid them. Okay, we don't want threats. We're going to transfer them. Transferring typically means you bring a contractor in to do it, or you buy insurance and that sort of stuff. You can try to mitigate some of these threats, or you can just accept the threat because they're so minor that you don't think it's ever going to happen, so you just accept it, and I'm not going to deal with that. On the other side, we really want to exploit really good opportunities. We might want to share them in some way by maybe having a contractor or somebody else coming on board and helping us out with it. We want to enhance instead of mitigate. We want to make sure that we enhance the process by using it. And we can ignore an opportunity if it's just really not going to help us meet objectives on the other side. So we can see the strategy in the middle. So then we come up with P2 plans, P2 action plans. Whoa. So once you come up with, you're going to respond to an opportunity and threat, we create a plan, we implement it, we evaluate the performance. Did we improve the process to meet the objectives of the organization as well as the process? And then, yeah, you can report it to stakeholders. So there's this real sort of a maturity sort of grid that we go through here. And that is where a lot of environmental people and health and safety people are still down chasing threats. And the threats are new regulations or, old regulations and that sort of stuff. So they're really fearful of these requirements they have on them. And by the way, customers now are huge regulators. What was it? Target, about 2 years ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, actually banned a chemical that no country in the entire world has banned. And Walmart's trying to ban a few chemicals now, and they got their own programs and that sort of stuff. Everybody's fearful of that because Walmart says, you don't follow our rules, we're going to fire you. It's sort of like a Donald Trump. Yeah, we'll fire you. You're going to be gone. You're going to be out of here. And so you're really fearful of those. So you could come up in the middle here, and under enterprise risk management programs for publicly traded companies, there's a conformance sort of program. It's called we call them operational controls in ISO, and that's still in there, but they call them internal controls. And they're things that people could do wrong that would cause there to be a financial impact to the company and maybe cause us to go bankrupt suddenly. And we can't have that anymore. So they have these conformance sort of programs. And ISO is a conformance program too. And it's better than hazard management because it's in there, but your focus is different. And then finally, we got this perform. And so we do have performance evaluation in Section 9 now. And so here we're managing opportunities. Wow. So this is where pollution prevention is. It's right at the top. and energy conservation and energy reduction right at the top, because we want to invest, we want to enhance, we want to have success, we want to embrace this, and above all, we want to create value here. So this is a pretty widely used maturity matrix. We're seeing a lot more use of maturity matrices and management systems now, and instead of making numbers work, what you're trying to do is show the program is getting more mature over time, and that maturity is going to show me that I'm really helping the organization meet its objectives. So let's look at this for a minute. And on the left-hand side, I have the word sustainability in there, but we could put pollution prevention in there. It's a part of sustainability, obviously, and very a way of making sustainability happen, or energy reduction, or any of the other services that you're offering. We can define them now. We can put them in a risk-based thinking, and we can have them in there. And they're in there. Now, what we've done is use the bottom route a lot. How do we get operations really chugging along here? And operations, by the way, work in uncertainty too. So if they need electric power and there's no electric power, guess what? If they need a fuel and there's no fuel, guess what? So they really have uncertainty, and people cause problems and stuff like that. People generate a lot of uncertainty. Or we can go the top route now, which is what we've always been trying to do, is get into the managing of the organization. So if we go in and talk about, gee, we understand that your objectives are this. Where did you find that out? Oh, it was on your website, and, oh, yeah, that's right. Well, we have that on there. And that we're here to help you do that. So you can go in both places. You're helping operations, you're helping management. And again, it's really about managing uncertainty. There's an awful lot of stuff on uncertainty on the internet now. And it used to be that uncertainty came only from events. Something really bad happened. So tornado, hurricane, typhoon, earthquake, tsunami, you name it, volcanoes going off. Those are events. And they happen sort of suddenly, and we've had a lot of really bad events here in the month of February here in New England. And it's there's nothing you can do about that. But it turns out that if you really look at what brings companies down, bad decisions bring more companies down than all the events put together. So, so you take that CEO of Tyco, who's in jail now. So he just decided he's going to take his wife and a whole bunch of people for a big birthday party in Paris, and he's going to fly them all over there on the company jet and company money and stuff like that. And he had his whole house full of artwork and had multiple houses. The company was paying for all of those. And it was a pretty bad decision. It was pretty bad. And so we find out the decision-making is really sort of a big part of this. And this decision-making, actually, there's a lot of theories on how do you make better decisions in order to help the company meet its objectives. So it sort of supports the risk thing. So you need something called knowledge management, which we have with P2RX and some of the things. It's actually really a knowledge management system. And it should help us make better decisions based on what we know. And then you have this thing called sense-making, which is becoming very popular. So sense-making is sort of like a lookout panel that you would use in scenario analysis. So a scenario, you look at trends, and you extend those trends out like there's going to be no change whatsoever in the current trends, and extend them out 10 years, and that's a scenario. So it's not a crystal ball. It's based on actual trends that are happening today, and just extend it out 10 years. So you have a lookout panel, which is really doing sense-making, because they have to figure out, so when are these trends changing? Because the moment the trends change, then the scenario is not good anymore. Then you're going to come up with another scenario. So you got to figure out, what's the neighborhood saying about, especially, the odors, the light, the vibrations, the noise, the nuisance things that people really hate. In fact, they don't mind chemicals as much as they hate these nuisance things. And the idea is you might go from one to the other, and you have two nuisances, and one really bothers them more than the other, then all of a sudden the other one starts bothering them. So, that's sense making. And you do that through your stakeholders. So if you're really engaging with your stakeholders and talking to them, they'll help you do the sense making because they're the ones that are behind the sense. But you got to figure that employees, and sustainability people love employee engagement, there are internal stakeholders. But, employees actually spend more time outside of work than they do in work. So they're really external stakeholders as well. They have families, they go to houses of worship, they go to stores, they go to belong to civic club, professional association, and they're talking to your stakeholders all the time. So I think that this is really trying to bring in this whole area of uncertainty is we really need to understand what's going on around us a lot more. So what are our suppliers doing? Actually, your suppliers are internal because you do have some element of control over them. There's a sphere of influence, as ISO 26000 social responsibility standard says, or you actually have direct control in some cases. So this whole area in the middle is really sort of the pivoting where everything's going to take place. You're going to need to understand uncertainty a lot more. And I think the slide I showed you with the PESTEL and the SWIFT program and by the way, regulations change, don't they? They're interpreted differently. The courts get involved in them. Groups bring suits. And so our knowledge of regulations actually is always sort of changing just a little bit. And we spend time with that. But I think that everything else is changing too. So we really need to spend more time on that. And guess what? If we do all of that, we're going to help the organization meet its objectives, and life is going to be good. But what's your responsibility in here? Well, this risk-based thinking, the reason why they have it is it's supposed to provide, again, a structured, credible foundation for discussions around, put pollution prevention in there, is a means for the organization to meet its objectives. So it could be P2E2, whatever you want to put in there. Sustainability. But the idea is you can't help an organization meet its objectives if you don't know what the objectives are. And some organizations have, again, implicit objectives, so they never written them down. So sometimes you got to work with them in terms of their objectives and then show how you're going to do those, and you're going to be very welcome. And this is, this risk management standard actually goes back to about 1990 in Australia. And I used to work for an Australian company when I started doing my ISO work, and I got involved with this risk management program. In the year 2009, I worked with a 2004 version. In 2009, it became an international standard. And it's because Japan really liked the Australian program. Flew down to Australia and said, gee, we want to make this a world standard. They went to ISO together, and now it's history. And now it's being actually put into all the other standards. Because again, I think ISO felt that risks wouldn't be done separately, but if we infused it into everything else, it would really help. So it enables pollution prevention to become part of what every employee does every day. We're actually going to put it in the work instruction now. So when you have something that needs to be done every day, and it's pollution prevention, and I know Cam always did that with the signs and stuff like that and the controls. It's true. But you really want people to not just do it as part of what they do, but know that it's pollution prevention or energy reduction. It's got to build on what's already in place. So these standards shouldn't be new things and that wipes everything else out. It really should be, say, well, we got pollution prevention in place already. How does this help pollution prevention? Well, where do you fit in the principles? You actually probably fit into all 11 of them. The framework is now our Plan, Do, Check, Act with the risks sort of in there. And the process is the risk assessment. So when you do aspects now, your aspects are going to be positive aspects and negative aspects. You're going to get used to that a little bit. And you don't have to call them aspects. They can be, again, opportunities and threats. And then when you go through the process of coming up with significance, you're going to use pretty much the same. You were using risk assessment. You just hated to admit it. So the risk criteria diagram or the risk map is going to look a little funny. This is actually going to have green in there. It's going to have really green. We're going to green you up a little bit here, and we're going to use the green to sort of neutralize the really bad red stuff on the other side. And so I think and it's so visual. Everyone loves that diagram when you plop it down the table. And like I said, I don't know if there's too many people that use that, but certainly be my guest. It'll really help you explain these things a little bit better. And then the case for pollution prevention is sort of rooted in what the principles they say is you can't just have those principles hanging up on a wall and say, God, those are great principles. You've got to give effect to them. And you look up and Google the term give effect to. It really, what are you doing to make that principle alive and well? And there's 11 of them, and you got to do all 11. And you got to do them differently in every place because of culture and because of external things and stuff like that. So these are the kind of things that, you're sort of doing, and you're not, again, you're doing them implicitly. So we're going to pull them out explicitly. And again, I promise you that after the end of the last slide, when you have this, I'm really not going to go through what's in step 1, what's in step 2, what's in step 3, and all of that stuff. But I have listed them all. And there's actually quite a bit of stuff on the internet now about the revision process of ISO and sort of where the changes are and stuff like that. So, you can educate yourself on those. But, I really am talking to Jeff about this, and I gave a presentation like this out at the Pacific Northwest Pollution Center at their annual meeting, and it went pretty well. And it's these are things we've been thinking about, but now they become like legal. They become like explicit, and I think you really sort of need to jump on them to make them happen in you. So what's the takeaways here? So the takeaway is, yeah, we've come a long way. Holy God, I've been slugging this out. What the first pollution prevention report out of EPA came out in '87. So we've been a long way from that particular point of coming up to the one that Cam and I wrote in the year 2000, where we started bringing in environmental management systems and stuff like that in there. And again, we can just say, Toto, this doesn't look like Kansas anymore. And no, it doesn't look like Kansas anymore. It's it's sort of a different world, and it doesn't look like any of the states you're in. But this is really going to go worldwide. I think many of you have got involved in some of the supply chain work, and you go to other countries. And I've been to quite a few of the Asian countries now doing this kind of thing, and they really they really understand this stuff a little bit better than we do, because I think they haven't been turned off that risk is a real bad thing all the time, and it isn't. And then what do we have? We have an environmental management system. My tribute to my good buddy Cam, and I think that that's what this is really going to be, because they really get us up to the top now. It was sometimes hard because the management people weren't saying, well, that's not our program, that's the environmental program, And so, no, it's the environmental management system. So I think we're really, truly getting there when this comes out this fall. And then, gee, I just can't wait to try this stuff out. This would be really good to help me out. And by the way, I don't think you have to wait for the new standard to come out. I think if you can really get into helping the organization meet its objectives, that you'll go a long way to doing that. So I'm just going to show you so you just see a peek behind here. I'm going to go back, but I have the website here for the ISO 31000 in plain English. This is really, it's a cool thing. They have an intro, which is I think on 1 page, an overview, which is 2 or 3 pages, the standard, and it's not the entire standard, but it tells you enough that you need, and then the definition. And then below, I go through each item. So section 4, section 5, section 6, go through all the ones. If you're really into this stuff, be my guest. It'll be there with the slides. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff, and we're going to see whether we have any questions. And I've given Jeff PDF copies of the slides that you can post up there so you can see all the information that's on there. And any questions we don't get to today, he will submit to me. I will answer them, and they'll be posted at the same place where this goes. So with that, Jeff, I can turn it back over to you if you want to do that now.
Bob, we don't have any. Nobody has submitted any questions. So I would ask if anybody does have a question, submit it now.
Yeah, put some questions up now, because I think that we can have them. And I mean, I can think of a lot of questions, and especially again, I talk to the people that write these standards, and I'm on the LinkedIn groups a lot with things having to do with these standards, and I think there's still a lot of. I worked with one trade association in the United States, and they wanted to go over. They had to upgrade. They had their own management system. They had to upgrade it, and I gave a presentation like this, and the first question is risk. You used the word risk. Where did this word risk come from? How come? And they were so upset. They used it's like a 4-letter word. It is. And and everybody was really upset, and I answered the questions, and then they basically began to understand this. But a lot of people, and I think I joked with Jeff a little bit earlier as we were getting set up for this, is there are probably more definitions of risk management than there are of sustainability. So I thought I was doing great when I went to risk management from sustainability, thinking, gee, everyone's going to understand this, and no one understands it. So I think, but it's the concepts I've just given you are really concepts that are pretty easy to understand, and that sort of stuff.
Okay, we do have a question. Can or will you be able to give us a concrete example of a company that got value out of doing this risk-based approach?
Yeah. I have one of my favorite ones, and it's actually a Dow Chemical. And so the guy, Neil Hawkins, he's a Harvard School of Public Health graduate, and he's like pretty high up at Dow, and he's doing a lot of great sustainability stuff. But he wants to be the big cheese. He wants to get the big job. So he had a thing, and he signed up to do something with the Nature Conservancy. So basically, when he signed up with them, gave him $10 million to look at 3 sites. Man, $10 million to look at 3 sites. Pretty cool. And so Dow has about 91 sites in the world. And that's what, all the chemical plants are on site. So a site typically has a minimum of 5 chemical plants on a site. And I'm going to tell you that the CEO of Dow, no matter who that CEO is, knows the first name of all 91 site managers. They are admirals in the fleet. And the people that run the chemical plants are skippers, and many of them will never become an admiral. So what the Nature Conservancy really likes to do is they like to come in and rehab wetlands. And in Texas, a lot of the chemical plants have wetlands there, and they like to plant trees. They really love to plant trees. They go bonkers and plant trees and make trees grow and stuff like that. So they had this one plant, and they actually did a great job with the wetland. And the site manager, really had no interest in it whatsoever. He says, it's a bunch of wet weeds, and it's got dragonflies, and I hate dragonflies. And they said, oh, we're doing a good thing here. So what they decided to do was, we're going to go, Mother Nature is providing this plant with services, and we're going to monetize those services. The first thing I'm thinking about is, well, when the IRS finds out, Internal Revenue Service finds out that Mother Nature is, the plant's giving money to Mother Nature, or Mother Nature is giving them money, they're going to want to tax that. And in fact, they would. Believe me, they would. And so I thought that was a really bad idea. And of course, the site manager didn't get it. So later on, a bunch of us had a chance to go down to that site and talk to the site manager. It was something completely different, but we knew this was going on. And I asked him, do you have a risk map? He looked at me, he smiled, he says, yes, sir. He says, I do. And he was able to pull it out. We put it on the table. So I says, what's in that red zone up there? What's in the upper right-hand corner? And it was a high frequent, an intense storm, like a Katrina. So why is this storm important to you? He says, if I cannot get feedstock in here, I have to shut down. If I can't get product out of here, I have to shut down. If I can't get workers in and out, I have to shut down. He says, when I shut down, almost everything that's in process becomes a hazardous waste. So he said, that cost me about $3.5 million to $7 million to get rid of all that hazardous waste. This is a lot. And he says about, I think it was $1.5 million a day to be down. And then the startup is really difficult, and that's going to cost another $3 million on top of that. So a lot of money to shut down, and because the shutdown is sudden. It's a sudden event. So so I said, well, that wetland they put out there, it has the power to absorb a 100-year flood. He said, really? They never told me that. They're talking about Mother Nature. They're talking about dragonflies and that sort of stuff. They never told me that stuff. And he says, he said, that's really interesting, because that would really help me out with my risk. So it's an opportunity, right? And it's in the green zone. But he says, Katrina and a couple of the other ones we've had, they were 150-year storms. Well, you got space on the other side. Maybe the Nature Conservancy will get a consulting firm to come in with them, and they'll build your wetland on the other side. He said, that sounds pretty good. I think I'll give them a call. So, I think that these are the kind of things you're seeing, is you're really trying so hard to sell something to someone that you're forgetting the fact that you're really on an opportunity thing, and, what can I offset against that? And I'm going to tell you, every manager worth their salt knows what a risk map is and has one in there. So, I think those are the kind of things you really need to look at in terms of opportunities. And, if you got an opportunity where, I don't know, you go to a dry, and I'm thinking a wet, well, sometimes the things you like are ruled out here. So when you go to wet cleaning, for example, instead of dry cleaning with perchloroethylene, I got to use an awful lot more stain removers up front, because perc can take blood, and it can take grass, and it can take mud, and it can take all that stuff out, but many of the surfactants can't. So I'm going to use these stain removers, and when I put the stain removers in, they get washed out in the water. A number of them are endocrine disruptors and get out in the environment. Well, we're not going to worry about that stuff. And then almost everything that's wet wash has to be ironed, and very few things that go through perc have to be ironed. So, here, some of the things that you thought were opportunities are, you got them now outside the box a little bit, and they should be in the box. And it becomes a more difficult sell, except that wet cleaning is better for many things, but not all things. So, but can you completely remove the perc? I think these are the kind of things, and I've always been worried about the system thing. So when you went to soy-based inks, oils, they're very slippery. So the slips, trips, and falls went up a lot. So, I got rid of the benzene, xylene, ethylbenzene, and toluene, and I got people breaking arms, breaking ribs, smashing their head against the system. And then somebody tells me, oh, well, you just put a mat down on there, and they won't slip on the mat. Yeah, but the mat starts turning green, purple, yellow with all the bacteria that are growing on there. People are allergic to bacteria, then having trouble. These are the kind of things we've had to deal with, and I think the risk thinking, where I get opportunities and threats, and I can put them down in one place, I can look at them, I can begin to see value right away, because if I have to treat a threat versus offsetting it with an opportunity at no extra cost really, or very little extra cost, I get a deal here. So I think it's really a matter of how you make your case and how you visualize that and get somebody in there. But I could give you hundreds of value things and show you how some of the things you've struggled with before have it. But value is really important, and the value really is not just money. It's helping the organization meet their objectives, and some of their objectives are not money.
Okay, thank you. And the questioner actually said that that was a good story about the wetland. One more question. Have you seen this to motivate toxics use reduction?
Say that again now, the first part?
Have you seen the risk-based thinking motivate toxics use reduction?
Well, I think it's going to make some things easier and challenge other things, of course, because you're going to have to ask a lot more questions, and you're going to have to look at it in terms of opportunities and threats. So that the problem with toxic use reduction has been is it's all about toxicity. It's all about chemicals causing cancer or other big problems in there, and it's not about the other problems that they have as a result. So I remember reviewing some work one time of somebody who was going to make, it was like a copying machine, like a Xerox machine, but instead of putting toner down, it was going to take the toner off, and it was going to actually iron the paper so I could use it over again. So it was going to be clean and ironed. Honest to God, it was a small business innovation program. And they use a proprietary chemical in there. We can't tell you what this proprietary chemical is. It's straight secret. And they said something about, well, you know, the proprietary chemical, it's not on any one of the EPA lists. Because, you know, EPA has a list of lists. It's not on any of them. It must be okay. So, and, you know, that's not true. I mean, so I went through every single piece of paper they had. I went through their website, and I found the name of the chemical. And it was a chemical that was, you know, probably not really toxic under most conditions, but it says in the material safety data sheet is not to use it in a semi-confined space. And almost every copying machine I know of is in like a closet or in like a corner. There's absolutely no ventilation in there whatsoever. So in fact, it made it bad. And by the way, they did not get their grant. Despite the fact that everybody loved their idea of ironing a piece of paper, and the iron thing didn't impress me either. So, you know, I think if we're really sort of steadfast in trying to eliminate toxicity, we need to think about, so are there slip, trips, and falls? Are there other sort of safety problems? Because typically if we go from a toxicological problem to a health and safety problem, we don't care about that. Because we don't cover that part. And what risk-based thinking is going to make you think that out. Now, it doesn't eliminate the use of these things, but it makes you maybe use them under, you know, slightly more controlled conditions, or maybe only for some of the things. I'm going to tailor it to the applications where it's used the best. And part of the problem with toxic use reduction, same problem with pollution prevention, is with all of these success stories that you have, they might have been very successful in the place they were done, but would not be successful in other places for different reasons. So it's really going to make you think these things out. But I think that it's giving you a platform of asking these questions, comparing them, and that matrix that I showed, which everyone really seems to like, this one is really, it's going to really help you. Because it's really going to help you think these things out and ask these questions and talk to stakeholders about it and that sort of stuff. So, but I don't think you're going to be able to wholesale something, and because it works in one place, to be able to go everywhere. It's going to be, I think you really need to treat almost every site as separate, and that's not a bad thing to do, because then there's more demand for your service to do that. So, in a way, it simplifies because you've got more information to show. In a way, it makes your job a little bit more complicated. But the idea is that we can now reduce uncertainty, and we couldn't do that before.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I think that will take up our full allotment of time. So yep. I want to just remind everybody that there will be a survey coming out. Please respond to that so that we get everybody's input. I do want to remind you that if you have any more questions for Bob, you can send them to me, Jeff Burke, jeff@p2.org. We have our email system back up and running again. We had a little glitch there for the last week. But that's up and running. So if you have any additional questions, something hits you later in the day or whenever, you can send those to me. I'll forward those on to Bob, and we'll get a response and then post those up on the NPPR website, which is at www.p2.org. Just want to remind folks that there's on that website we have our new green chemistry guide, and we're going to be starting a series of webinars in the spring. On that guide we'll have an overview webinar, and then each section of the guide We are trying to get the authors of those sections to provide us with a webinar to explain the guide. We may not do it in the exact order that the guide's presented based on people's schedules and availability, but we will try and cover all sections of that particular document. Our next webinar will be on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. So we may try and, that'll be still at 2 o'clock Eastern time, so those on the East Coast will still have plenty of time to go out and celebrate afterwards. The topic will also deal with plastics. We had a tremendous response to our webinar on the microplastics, and so we wanted to follow that up with another webinar dealing with plastics in general. And we'll be putting out information on registration for that shortly, and so look for that information also again up on the MPPR website. Again, I want to thank Dr. Robert Pojasek for his fantastic presentation. I think it was very informative, and look forward to future opportunities to share more information about environmental management systems with folks. With that, I'm going to close this webinar. Thanks everybody for your participation, and we'll catch you next time.